The dusty streets of Willow Creek, Texas, bore witness to many shameful acts in the summer of 1873, but none quite like what transpired that scorching July afternoon. Margaret Whitfield, barely 17, stood on a makeshift wooden platform outside Garrison's general store, her auburn hair catching the harsh sunlight as tears carved clean tracks through the dirt on her face. $5! Her father, Cornelius Whitfield, bellowed to the gathering crowd, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. "Oh, that's all I'm asking for this ungrateful wench. She eats too much and works too little," the townspeople murmured among themselves, some in disgust, others in morbid curiosity. Margaret's mother had died 3 winters prior, leaving her alone with a father whose gambling debts had mounted higher than the canyon walls surrounding their failed homestead. "Papa, please," Margaret whispered, her voice barely audible above the desert wind. "I'll work harder. I'll eat less. Just don't do this." Cornelius spat tobacco juice near her feet. "Should have thought of that before you burned the cornbread and let the chickens escape last week. Cost me a whole $1 replacing them birds." From the back of the crowd, a tall figure emerged. Theodore "Theo" Blackwood, owner of the sprawling Double Oak Ranch 20 miles north, rarely came to town. When he did, people noticed. His weathered face bore the marks of countless days under the unforgiving sun, and his gray eyes held a depth that made most folks uncomfortable. At 35, he'd built his ranch from nothing, preferring the company of cattle and horses to people. "I'll take her," Theo said quietly, his deep voice cutting through the crowd's chatter like a knife through butter. Cornelius's eyes lit up with greed. $5, mister, and she's yours. Can cook some, clean better, and she's strong despite her scrawny look." Theo reached into his vest pocket and withdrew 5 silver dollars, each one gleaming in the afternoon sun. He placed them deliberately in Cornelius's grimy palm, his expression unreadable. "Get your things," Theo said to Margaret, his tone neither harsh nor gentle, simply matter of fact. Margaret looked between her father, who was already counting his coins with trembling fingers, and this stranger who'd just purchased her like livestock. What choice did she have? With shaking hands, she gathered her meager possessions, a faded calico dress, her mother's Bible, and a small wooden box containing her only treasure, a silver locket with her mother's portrait. As Theo's wagon rolled out of Willow Creek, Margaret sat rigid beside him, unsure whether she'd been saved or damned. The man hadn't spoken since they'd left town, his attention focused on the dusty trail ahead. The silence stretched between them like the endless Texas plains, broken only by the creaking of wagon wheels and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. The Double Oak Ranch appeared like a mirage after hours of travel through scrubland and mesquite. Margaret had expected something run down, matching the gruff exterior of her new owner. Instead, she found herself staring at a well-maintained homestead with a 2-story main house, freshly painted white with green shutters. Corrals held healthy horses, and in the distance she could see vast herds of cattle grazing peacefully. "And this is your home now," Theo said, the first words he'd spoken in miles. He helped her down from the wagon with surprising gentleness. "I'll show you to your room." "My room?" Margaret stammered. She'd expected to sleep in the barn or perhaps a corner of the kitchen. Theo's brow furrowed slightly. "Where else would you sleep? Come on, daylight's wasting." The interior of the house was simple but clean, with handmade furniture and windows that let in streams of golden light. Theo led her upstairs to a small but comfortable room with a real bed, a washstand, and even a mirror. "This was my sister's room," he said quietly. "She married and moved to California 5 years back. You're about her size. Her clothes are in that wardrobe. Take what fits." Margaret stood frozen, overwhelmed. "Mr. Blackwood," I don't understand. You bought me for $5. Why are you— I didn't buy you, Theo interrupted, his grey eyes flashing with something she couldn't identify. I bought your freedom from a man who didn't deserve to call himself a father. You're not property here, Miss Whitfield. You're a person who needs a safe place to stay and honest work to do. I need help running this household since my cook, in Dolores, is getting on in years. You'll be paid fair wages, $2 a week plus room and board. If you want to leave after you've saved enough, that's your choice. Tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks. In all her 17 years, no one had ever spoken to her with such matter-of-fact respect. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Nothing needs saying. Supper's at 6. Dolores will show you the kitchen and explain your duties. Rest today. You look like you could use it. As he turned to leave, Margaret found her voice. Mr. Blackwood. Thank you. He paused at the doorway, not turning around. Theo. Just call me Theo. We don't stand on ceremony here. That first evening, Margaret met Dolores Mendoza, a plump Mexican woman in her 60s who immediately enveloped her in a warm embrace. Ay, pobrecita, Dolores murmured. So thin, we'll fix that. Come, let me show you around. The kitchen was Dolores's domain, filled with the scents of chili and fresh bread. As they prepared supper together, Dolores shared stories about Theo. He's a good man, mija, though he doesn't let many see it. Lost his parents to cholera when he was just 15. Built this ranch with his own 2 hands, working jobs no one else would take. He could have married any girl in 3 counties, but— Dolores shrugged. He says he's married to the land. Over dinner, Margaret observed Theo carefully. He ate quietly, thanking Dolores for the meal with genuine appreciation. When Margaret accidentally dropped a plate, shattering it on the stone floor, she cringed, expecting anger. But instead, Theo simply said, "It happens to everyone. There's a broom in the pantry." That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in years, Margaret stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of this strange turn in her life. Outside, she could hear the lowing of cattle and the distant howl of coyotes. But for the first time since her mother's death, she felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Safety. Weeks turned into months at the Double Oak Ranch, and Margaret discovered a rhythm to life she'd never known. Each dawn, she rose to help Dolores with breakfast for the ranch hands, 10 men who treated her with a respect that initially made her suspicious. Theo had clearly made it known that she was under his protection, and any man who forgot that would find himself looking for work elsewhere. The first test of Theo's character came when Cornelius Whitfield appeared at the ranch, drunk and demanding more money. $5 wasn't enough, he slurred, swaying on the front porch. She's my daughter. I deserve compensation for raising her all these years. Margaret, hidden behind the door, trembled as memories of his rages flooded back. But Theo's voice, calm and cold as winter steel, cut through her father's ravings. You sold your rights as a father the day you put her on that platform. Get off my land, Whitfield, and don't come back. Next time, I won't be so polite. You can't threaten me. I'll go to the sheriff. Go ahead. Sheriff Morrison was in that crowd. He saw what you did. So did Judge Harper. Now get out before I help you along. Through the window, Margaret watched her father stumble away, and something inside her chest loosened. A knot of fear she'd carried for so long, she'd forgotten it was there. That evening, she found Theo in the barn, tending to a mare about to foal. Thank you, she said softly, for sending him away. Theo didn't look up from the laboring horse. No need for thanks. Man like that has no business calling himself a father. He paused, then added quietly, My pa was the same way before the sickness took him. Whiskey and anger, that's all some men have to give. It was the most personal thing he'd shared, and Margaret treasured it like gold. As autumn arrived, painting the Texas hills in shades of amber and rust, Margaret had transformed. Good food and hard work had filled out her frame, and the constant fear that had haunted her eyes gradually faded. She discovered she had a talent for managing the household accounts, and Theo, recognizing her intelligence, began teaching her about ranch operations. "You've got a head for numbers," he said one evening as they reviewed the ledgers together. "Better than most of my hands." Their relationship remained proper. Theo was unfailingly respectful, never crossing any boundaries. But Margaret began to notice small kindnesses. A book of poetry left on her dresser after she'd mentioned missing her mother's library. Wildflowers on the kitchen table when she seemed sad. An extra blanket on cold nights. Dolores watched it all with knowing eyes. "He's different since you came," she told Margaret one day while they made preserves. "Smiles more, talks more. That man's been alone too long." "He's my employer," Margaret said firmly, though her cheeks flushed. Dolores hummed, unconvinced. "And I'm the Queen of Spain." The truth was, Margaret's feelings had evolved from gratitude to something deeper. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the rare moments when Theo's stern facade cracked and revealed the kind, lonely man beneath. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he was amused, how gentle his hands were with the animals, the way he always made sure she ate enough at dinner. One November evening, a blue norther blew in, dropping the temperature dramatically. Margaret found Theo in the barn, trying to save a calf that had been born too early. Without thinking, she knelt beside him, helping to rub warmth into. "The tiny creature might not make it," Theo said grimly. "Don't say that," Margaret replied firmly. "Every life deserves a chance." They worked through the night, taking turns warming the calf, feeding it with a bottle Dolores prepared. As dawn broke, the little animal finally stood on shaky legs, and Theo's face broke into the first full smile she'd seen from him. "You did it," he said, looking at Margaret with something new in his eyes. "We did it," she corrected, and in that moment, something shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. Winter arrived with unexpected fury that year of 1874, blanketing the Double Oak Ranch in a rare Texas snowfall. The cattle huddled together for warmth, and the ranch hands worked tirelessly to ensure the animals survived. Margaret had been at the ranch for 6 months now, and the scared girl who'd stood on that platform in Willow Creek seemed like a stranger from another lifetime. One particularly bitter evening, Theo didn't return from checking the far pastures. Worry gnawed at Margaret as she paced the kitchen, peering out the frosted windows into the swirling white darkness. "He knows this land like the back of his hand," Dolores assured her, but Margaret could see the concern in the older woman's eyes too. Unable to wait any longer, Margaret bundled herself in every warm garment she could find and saddled Buttercup, the gentle mare Theo had taught her to ride. Dolores protested, but Margaret was already heading into the storm. She found him, 2 miles from the house, his horse having stepped in a hidden prairie dog hole and thrown him. Theo lay unconscious in the snow, his face pale as death. With strength born of desperation, Margaret managed to get him onto Buttercup, holding him steady as she led both horses back through the blinding snow. The next 3 days were the longest of Margaret's life. Theo burned with fever, delirious and calling out names she didn't recognize, his parents, his sister, and surprisingly, her own. She never left his side, cooling his fever with damp cloths, spooning broth between his cracked lips, praying to her mother's God for mercy. On the 4th dawn, his grey eyes opened, clear and focused. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm here," she said, tears of relief streaming down her face. His hand, still weak, found hers. "You came for me." "Of course I did," she said fiercely. "You saved me first." Something shifted in his expression, walls crumbling. That had stood for years. Margaret, I need to tell you something. That day in town, I didn't just happen to be there. I'd seen you before, weeks earlier, when I came for supplies, saw how he treated you. I couldn't stop thinking about it, about you. So I came back, hoping. Hoping what? She breathed. Hoping I could help. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. These months, having you here. I'm not good with words, Margaret. I've been alone so long I forgot how to feel, but you've changed that. You've changed everything. Margaret's heart thundered in her chest. Theo, I know I'm too old for you, too set in my ways. I know you deserve better than a weathered rancher who talks more to cattle than people. But I need you to know that She silenced him with a gentle finger to his lips. You're not too old. You're not too anything. You're the man who saw my worth when my own father couldn't. You're kind and gentle and good. And I love you, Theodore Blackwood. I think I have for months now. His eyes widened, then softened with an emotion so raw it took her breath away. You love me. With all my heart, she whispered. He pulled her down for a kiss that was gentle and fierce all at once, pouring months of unspoken feelings into that single moment. When they parted, both were crying. Marry me, he said urgently. I know I should court you proper, but I almost died out there, and it made me realize I don't want to waste another day. Marry me, Margaret. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you how precious you are. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Dolores, who'd been shamelessly eavesdropping from the doorway, burst into tears of joy. Gracias a Dios. Finally. I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other forever. Dudush. The wedding took place on a glorious spring morning in 1874, in the meadow behind the ranch house, where wildflowers bloomed in riotous color. Word had spread throughout the county about the rancher who'd rescued the girl from her father's cruelty, and their love story had captured hearts far and wide. Even Sheriff Morrison attended, along with Judge Harper and his wife. Margaret wore Theo's sister's wedding dress, altered by Dolores's skilled hands to fit perfectly. As she walked through the wildflowers toward Theo, who stood waiting, in his best suit, she thought her heart might burst from happiness. His eyes never left hers, and the love she saw there still took her breath away. You sure about this? Ooh, he whispered when she reached him, a trace of his old uncertainty surfacing. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, she whispered back. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, officiated by Reverend Coleman from the neighboring town. When Theo kissed his bride, the ranch hands whooped and fired their pistols into the air, making the horses whinny in protest. Life as Mrs. Theodore Blackwood brought new challenges and joys. Margaret threw herself into learning every aspect of ranch management, proving to be as capable a partner in business as she was in life. Under their joint leadership, the Double Oak Ranch prospered, expanding its holdings and improving its breeding stock. But the greatest joy came a year later when Margaret gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor after Margaret's mother. Theo, who'd been terrified throughout the pregnancy, held his daughter with such tender awe that Margaret fell in love with him all over again. She's perfect, he whispered, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Just like her mother. 3 more children followed over the years, Theodore Jr., whom they called TJ, twins Benjamin and Beatrice, filling the ranch house with laughter and chaos. Theo proved to be as devoted a father as he was a husband, patient and kind, never raising his hand in anger as both their fathers had done. Cornelius Whitfield appeared one last time when Eleanor was 3, broken by drink and disease, begging for money. Margaret, standing on her own porch with her children playing at her feet, felt only pity for the man who'd tried to destroy. I'll give you $50, she said quietly, enough to get you to California. Make a fresh start, but you can never come back here. My children will never know you." He took the money with shaking hands, unable to meet her eyes. As he shuffled away, Theo appeared beside her, sliding his arm around her waist. "That was generous of you," he said, "more than he deserved." "Maybe," Margaret replied, "but holding on to hate only poisons the one carrying it. He gave me something precious, even if he never meant to." "What's that?" She turned in his arms, smiling up at the man who'd changed her life. "He led me to you." Years passed, bringing droughts and floods, good harvests and bad, but through it all, Margaret and Theo faced each challenge together. The Double Oak Ranch became known not just for its fine cattle, but for the love story that had begun with an act of cruelty and transformed into something beautiful. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the same meadow where they'd married, Theo took Margaret's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "That day I bought your freedom." Margaret laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. "Theodore Blackwood, that was the best $5 ever spent in the history of Texas." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her graying hair. "For me too, my love. For me too." As the sun set over the Double Oak Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a frightened girl on an auction block to a beloved wife, mother and partner in one of the most successful ranches in Texas, it seemed like a miracle. But perhaps the greatest miracle was love itself, and its power to transform even the darkest beginning into a lifetime of light.